Hey ladies and gentlemen, it's Sunday. The weather's not great outside, but I do find myself with a whole mess of unused ground meat. So what am I gonna do? Instead of letting it go bad, instead of freezing it, I'm gonna make meatballs. I'm gonna show you today a traditional Italian style meatball. I'm gonna show you all the ingredients, how to prepare it, how to roll them into uniform sized meatballs, how to make them the perfect kind of consistency for your pasta, or whatever application you wanna use them for. So let me show you our ingredients. Over here, you have two different kinds of ground meat. The one that's right here, this red tubular one, is ground beef. It's about 88-12. When we talk about these percentages, 88-12, we're talking about 88% lean meat and 12% fat. A typical hamburger ratio, for example, would be 80-20. This one's a little bit more lean, so that just means we have to add more flavor, which is perfect for meatballs, right? We don't want our meatballs to be too soggy, too fatty. So using a leaner style of meat is definitely preferable to something that's more fatty. Over here, these giant starburst shaped packs of meat, that's pork. So you can make meatballs with just beef, just pork. Depending on the culture of meatball you're making, it could be any number of meats. It could be ground lamb. You know, it's basically just requires you to use ground meat and seasonings. A traditional Italian style meatball, like the one we're gonna make today, has about 50% beef, 50% pork. So that's why we're using these two different kinds of meats. Over here, we have panko breadcrumbs. Panko breadcrumbs are great. They're super fluffy, they're very absorbent. They're gonna help draw in all that grease that's in there. So if we bake our meatballs and we notice that they're a little bit fatty, that's gonna soak it all up. It's gonna lend itself to a great flavor. You could use regular Italian style breadcrumbs. You could use the flavored ones. If you use the flavored ones, just know that there's salt, there's Parmesan, there's oregano. So if you are used to making meatballs with that kind of breadcrumb and instead you use one that's like this, that's plain, you do have to add that extra flavor that you're losing out. Over here, we have garlic, right? Garlic and onions, essential ingredients in Italian style meatballs, right? When you consider what is a traditional Italian style sauce, it's very heavy with the onion and garlic flavor. So we don't want to exclude those parts. Here we have a whole mess of eggs. Same rule applies for meatloaf, for meatballs. You want to use about 1 egg per pound of meat. So I have about 12 pounds of meat, so I'm going to use 12 eggs. And the eggs are gonna act as our binder. They're gonna bring everything together. They're gonna make sure that these meatballs hold their shape, that they don't fall apart. Now we're gonna come over to our other ingredients. We have salt. I have kosher salt. I like to use kosher salt because it helps me identify exactly how much I'm seasoning. If you use regular table salt, which is not a problem, just know that a lot of it is going to be absorbed into the meat right away, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly how much you put in there. So I like to use kosher salt because it's big flakes of salt. Over here, we have whole oregano, right? A big dried oregano. Oregano is another one of those Mediterranean, very quintessential Italian ingredients. And over here we have dried basil leaves, right? It's gonna give it like that little licorice, little anise flavor. It's gonna bring some brightness to it. Now, why aren't we using fresh herbs for this? Well, a couple reasons. One, these two are dried, so that means the flavor is a little bit more concentrated. So it's gonna give us a little more punch, a little more bang for our buck. We also don't want to introduce too much moisture into our product, right? So we want to leave the moisture to the meat, the fat that's in the meat, the little bit of olive oil we're gonna add, the little bit of eggs that are gonna solidify and harden. We don't wanna add too much additional moisture from herbs that are even less potent than these ones. Has some olive oil. I'm just gonna add just a little bit. It's gonna give it a little more richness, a little more depth of flavor. Extra virgin olive oil, if you don't know, is the very first pressing of the olives. So extra virgin olive oil is when they squeeze the olives for the first time. Virgin olive oil is when they squeeze it the second time, and olive oil is when they squeeze it for the third and final time. So in terms of quality, extra virgin is the way to go. That's the most pure. Over here, I have some black pepper. It's always better to use fresh ground black pepper. It just gives it a more pungent, more potent bite. I have some cracked red pepper. This is going to give us a little bit of heat in the back end. It's not going to make our meatballs spicy, but it is going to have like a nice little spicy tang every other bite or so. And here I just have I have some junk Parmesan. Like ideally I would have a fresh block of Parmesan that I would grate right into the meatball mix. It would make it even better. Even though this is Walmarty and junky, it's still going to give us a little bit of a tang, a little bit of a bite that's going to be desirable.
Hey everybody, it's Mr. V, voiceover time. You see me blending my onions and garlic. That's because I don't want any big chunks of onion and garlic in my meatball, right? I want it to be pretty uniform. So I'm going to blend it up so that it's almost liquefied. I want this to have the same texture as the meat. I don't want it to be chunky or piecey. I kind of want it just to be able to blend in all together. So let me pick this up, narrate me picking it up. Here's me dumping it. I'm going to narrate me dumping it. Pour it right in there. Just throw it all in there. You don't have to be super specific. We're just putting it all together, dumping that cheese in. Again, I wish I had better quality cheese. That's, that grated Parmesan that's not even refrigerated. It's garbage. It's full of sawdust, like really. But we get by with it when we need it. So here you see me like blind measuring. I'm just kind of adding things like willy-nilly. It might seem willy-nilly, but I kind of understand from making this so many times exactly what I'm looking for in terms of ratios. Like if you just noticed, I added basil and then I added about twice as much oregano. I mean, this is something born out of lots of experience. Of course, you could follow a recipe, which I would recommend if you're doing it for the first time. But once you get to understand the food that you're making, you can kind of realize what you like, what you dislike, what you need more of, what you need less of. And here you see me cracking eggs. So again, about an egg per pound. Could you exclude eggs? You could exclude eggs. You might find that the meatballs will still hold together, but you're kind of being a little bit risky. Eggs are really kind of essential for this, so we don't want to eliminate eggs. We kind of want to put them in there. And here I'm adding my breadcrumbs. You see I have this giant bowl of breadcrumbs, but I'm not adding it all at once. Like a lot of things, we want to look for a very specific texture and consistency. So I can always add more breadcrumbs as I go, but I can never take them back out, right? So if I put too much in and there's not enough liquid, all of a sudden I'm going to have to add more eggs or more olive oil, or I'm going to, I have to adjust the recipe so that it becomes, something different. So here I am checking the texture of the meat. It's a little bit too sloppy, a little bit too wet. So I'm going back and I'm adding more breadcrumbs, right? Just use the hand test, right? The same thing we do with the cookie dough, where we want it to be that Play-Doh consistency. Kind of the same for meat, right? You're seeing me pulling apart a chunk of it. It's tearing away. It's not wet. Everything is pretty uniform. It looks like one solid hunk of ground meat. Yeah, you can see a little bit of the the breadcrumbs in there, a little bit of the herbs, but there's nothing standing out. Nothing is dry exactly, and nothing is wet exactly. It is very uniform. So here's a meatball. Just use your hands. You can use a cookie scoop too. You want it to be the size of about a golf ball. You can see the texture in there. Everything is pretty uniform. And there aren't like any big cracks or crevices. This is going to cook up really nicely. It's nice and tight. Here's one tray. Here's two trays. Here's three trays. So obviously I used like 12 pounds of meat. I ended up making like 8 trays of meatballs. A lot of them are frozen in my freezer. So you put them in the oven, 350, let them cook like half an hour, and that's all she wrote. And this is what you can do: put them some sauce, put it on some nice pasta, and then you have a really nice meatball dinner.